Hello, everyone. Good morning. Happy Tuesday, January 12th. I'm excited that you're here for the first Talk About It Tuesday of the year, and I'm even more thrilled for my guest, Debra Lynne Driscoll, who's going to be here talking about the myth and medicine of grief. What a special treat for you all today. Um, I met Debra recently and just instantly just knew that I wanted to connect with her and get to know her and be a part of her magic. Um, so you really have so much to gain from what she has to offer in this realm of grief, but also in magic because she's got experience in both of those realms. And she's coming on right now. And Lauren, it's so great to see you here. So we're just waiting for Deborah to join.
Hello.
Hello, Deborah!
Hello. Happy Tuesday. Happy new moon.
Yes, happy new moon indeed. Thank you so much for being a part of my very first Talk About It Tuesday of the year. Yay!
Yeah.
And honestly, I was just kind of giving a quick intro, Deborah, before you joined, but I just feel like the minute that I met you, I was like, oh, I need more. I need more of her and that energy and just you just have this like instant like connection to wisdom and warmth and so I'm just really honored for this conversation with you and such a difficult topic which I do not pretend to be any kind of expert in. That's why I have you here. But as I was reflecting on this conversation and I realized like how much in my life there has been grief that has probably been unaddressed. But with no further ado, what I want to do is hand it over to you to introduce yourself to this beautiful audience and share whatever you want about who you are, what you do, your journey, and what brings you here today.
Okay. Thank you, Tosca. Well, hello, everybody who's watching live and who's going to be watching the replay. I'm very pleased and happy to be with you here today having this conversation with Tosca and her community and everybody that we're going to reach. So, as Tosca said, I'm somebody who works with grief. So, I'm a grief guide, I'm an author, but I'm also a magic weaver. So I work with spiritual practice and creative process in helping people to heal, transform, and expand parts of their lives. And the grief part of my work, that's a very personal narrative for me, which I didn't enter this life thinking, okay, I'm going to be the grief girl. Like that wasn't like on the, new moon manifestation intention list. It's what the universe gave me in this life is a process of the death of people in my life very, very close to me. The very first man I ever loved, my father, and then more recently, my son. And so the death of those three men has brought me to, again and again, facing death and the process of grief and really digging in and diving in. And it was in processing my son's death 7 years ago. His name is Sage, and he passed away just 1 month shy of his 11th birthday. And there was no warning, there was no indication. One day I woke up and he didn't, and so my life went from being a single parent to being a grieving mother. Like, and a couple of days after my son Sage died, I had this really pivotal moment. Like I was literally collapsed on the kitchen floor in my home, and Sage wasn't there. There was people all milling around, bringing the lasagnas, pouring the wine, like doing the Australian version of sitting shiva. And I had this moment of just like being in the collapse and having the waves of the grief coming with like remembering what it was like when Nick died, remembering what it was like when my dad died, and thinking, man, am I going to drown? And then I thought, but since then, since those first two deaths, I have done so much work on learning about spiritual practice, applying healing, working through, working with creative process. I know so much more.
Mm.
So, what happens if I apply that to my life now? Can I survive? Can I make it through? is there a way through grief? This grief, the loss of my son. And, honestly, Tosca, sitting on that kitchen floor, I had no idea. But I was like, I am curious enough and I wanted enough. I want to be able to find whatever gift or possibility is available in this to me, because at the moment it doesn't feel like anything is available. And not easy, not an easy process, but I have over the years found ways to transform and alchemize and be with my grief. And I am now completely in a different situation, not collapsed on my kitchen floor. And part of the work I've been doing in the last couple of years is sharing that, what I have learned, with others so that they can also heal, transform, alchemize. Because, we're all going to experience grief. We all are experiencing grief right now. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your personal experience with this difficult topic for so many people. Difficult, as we were prepping, right? Difficult to talk about. And I think in my own experience, I've been around people that just have difficulty even acknowledging or taking any type of action. It can be paralyzing for some people.
Yeah.
And what I heard from you was that this combination of curiosity and desire is what kept you going. Is that a fair statement, or is there more to that?
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I did early in the wasn't actually full grief yet, in the shock in that first few days after Sage died, was I had this feeling that what I was going to do next was going to plant the seeds for my future. So I was well advised in listening to my intuition to be really mindful of what seeds I was planting. And one of the things I did, which still stays true to me now, is I said, I will always wish the best for myself. Just wish the best for myself. And what I discovered in staying to that wish, staying true to that, is the best for myself is to actually find ways to be with and process the grief rather than deny or push away. And as I say, I'm not here telling you that it's easy. It's exquisitely painful, but it is the best for you.
To face it, to deal with it.
Face it. And to face it and surrender to it, to be with it, because what I've found now is the beauty and temperance and patience and love lessons that grief brings us. And like in my process over the many years, what ended up happening for me is that grief became a character in my life. So I was aware that I was running a narrative for myself that grief was the enemy, I was the heroine, grief was the villain, and I had to conquer the villain to be victorious in this narrative. Right? That wasn't the best for me because I was at war with something that is a genuinely human experience, that is personal, that is about our hearts. So I was actually at war with myself. And so once I surrendered that and then went, okay, well, grief's not going anywhere, so let's get to know her. And so for me, grief is an angel, and she's big and she's beautiful and she has these really big, beautiful black wings. And so when I need her, she comes and she wraps her wings around me, because I know that grief is at service to me, teaching me about love and teaching me about processing hurt and pain and struggle and suffering, because that is a part of the human experience. It's not all happiness and joy. We want more of that, but we don't always get all of that. And when we can sit with and be with our grief, we actually do get more joy. That's the other thing that I found. Like when I found that, I was like, man, I've got to start telling this story. People don't know this.
Yeah, tell me more about this, the grief and joy and that relationship, and how to find more joy even with the grief.
Yeah, and it's kind of, it's not, it's not saying that there's joy in the grief, because grief is grief. Grief is I have lost something that I loved and it's not coming back, or it's never coming back the way that I loved it, and that's painful, and we process the fact that that's missing. So it's different than sadness or anger, because the thing that we're in relationship to is still around, right? Whereas grief is there's an ending. Something has ended, right? And that's what we need to process, the ending of that, to move towards our next beginning. But the part about grief and joy is grief is a process that we feel in our heart, like something that we love we have lost. So the work of grief is the work of love, right? The work of joy is also heart related and the work of love. So what happens if we minimize our grief, if we diminish it or we deny it, we bury it, we push it away, we're actually minimizing our capacity and potential for joy. Because what happens, this is the way I like to explain it and think about it, and this is what kind of transformed for me in my reality, is when grief comes to visit us, there is a breaking of the heart, and that's undeniable. The process of grief is how we then put that heart back together. And if we're present to what needs to be expressed or journeyed through in the putting back together, what we're doing is we're creating a binding back of our heart, and then our energetic heart muscle is stronger. Because it's the same as like when you go and do a workout, which I don't really do. But if you do, and then the next day you have like a sore muscle, like if you were to do some arm exercise, the next day your arms are sore. What's happened is your muscle fibers have broken. And then in the process of them healing and coming back together, that strengthens the muscle. That's how we get stronger muscles. It's the same with our energetic heart. So we experience heartbreak, and then we go through the healing of that to put those muscle fibers back together, which create a stronger muscle. When we have a stronger energetic heart, we not only have the capacity to hold all of the grief that we have experienced and process it and find the love within that, but then we have this heart that is stronger and has an expanded capacity. And that expanded capacity can then hold all of the joy that you seek. So if you minimize your grief, your processing and healing of grief, your acknowledgement of grief, then what you're doing in the long run is you're minimizing your potential for joy. So grief is not easy to process, but it's so worth it. Because not only is it the best for you, but it means that in chapters to come in your narrative, you will experience expanded joy.
And there's two things that come to mind. Number one, we kind of started to touch upon it earlier, right? Which is, clearly grief is part of the process of when you're losing somebody close, but it's also grief you can experience with so many different kinds of things.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
Go ahead, yeah.
And there's also layers to it. Like you can experience grief before the loss. You can experience grief repeatedly after the loss. Like there's so many different ways that grief turns up in our world. But essentially it's all that work of the heart that I was talking about. And I think that the other thing that's misunderstood about grief is it's not always the death of someone. It's the death of something or someone that you love. Because if you didn't really love it, you wouldn't really grieve it. You'd be like, oh, I'm noticing that that's gone. Oh, well. You carry on, or you might have a little bit of sadness or something that emerges, right? But grief is the fact that something or someone or some place or some idea or some dream that you loved is gone.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful to talk about it in that way because, also in the work that I do, right, very much around careers and around kind of the corporate experience and detoxifying workplaces, I think there's a lot of grief in if you lose a job or even if you left willingly and then you realize, oh, like you're still grieving some parts of that world, that life, or grieving, I don't know if this fits, you tell me, but like grieving what is not in this moment, right? Like even when I think about the events, last week, like
Yeah.
grieving that like we're not seeing the America that we thought we were.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and is there any tools or like any like how do you tell the difference between sadness and grief?
Yeah. I think like the difference for me in sadness and grief is that in grief something has broken. So there is a death or there is an ending. Like, so take for example, because I've also been thinking about this, Tosca, the events in the United States
Mhm.
last week. The thing that happened first is anger, dismay, shock, which is also very akin to the point when something ends, somebody dies, it's the ending of a relationship. There's like, is that actually really happening? Like there's a whole process that happens before grief actually comes to settle, right? Um, and what we're working towards collectively is, I think, understanding what we have lost as American citizens. And it's different for people living in different realities within America,
Mm.
right? But there is an intense amount of loss in the world at the moment. But if we're just going to zone in on the United States, there's an intense amount of loss that's happened over the last almost 12 months now.
Mm.
And that's been, sustained. And for some people, they literally have lost someone. We have been in a pandemic where people have literally died. But there's also been a lot of people who have lost employment,
Mm.
lost a dream or a goal they had for their own business. Some people have lost partnerships. Like we could, the loss is, there's a myriad of emotions and realities within that loss. I think the thing that the United States is missing right now is a conversation about grief,
Mm.
because there's individual grief and there's also collective grief. And one thing that happens in not all cultures, but definitely in the United States, and I also noticed it in Australia, which is where I was living when I lost my son, and really stepped into this grief journey in a big way 7 years ago, is that there's almost an illiteracy about,
Mm.
we don't know how to talk about it because we don't know the language. And there's a whole heap of myths around what it is and what it isn't. And there's not a lot of conversation about the medicine
Mm.
at all. And so, everyone's doing the best that they can with what they know. And in the grief landscape, there's not a lot that we know.
Well, and what comes up when you share that is like the things that we do know, attending a physical funeral, right? Like all of a sudden are also not available to us. So then what? Like how are you supposed to do this in a way that provides closure and can allow for the next step of the process? So yeah, I'm just sitting here going, yes, like we need a collective conversation. Okay, Deborah, like let's go to like the new administration is coming. I'm like, let's get in there. Let's get
Yeah,
you in there and
yeah.
get a megaphone to the world. Um,
Yeah, because things like, I remember, God, it would have been April going into May last year, sitting in my Brooklyn apartment and watching those numbers rise,
mm,
and knowing that around the country and around the world, families were going through that shock, that the initial separation, that it's just heartbreaking, and knowing that they couldn't be by the bedside, that they couldn't begin to
right.
plan the funeral, the sitting shiva, all of the different ways that we have been, in a conversation and in a ritual and practice, community practice around grief. And I was speaking to a friend of mine who's a death doula who supports people dying. And we were both remarking that, like, at what point are we going to have community remembrance, like a moment, a day? Like, we haven't even really had a collective breath together, let alone a moment of silence, let alone a day of remembrance and memorial for people. And I mean, I think it would be long overdue, but I think welcome to a lot of people to have that kind of collective moment. But what can you do if we don't have that moment? You know, what can you do within your own family, within your own community, within your own workplace to actually acknowledge the fact that not for everyone, but for many, there is a grief experience going on right now. And
yeah, and I'd love to get your thoughts on, like, what can we do? And I just want to quickly say, you know, which we talked about in prep for this, which is, you know, I think a lot of people were in this, like, it's a new year, like, oh my gosh, let's close the chapter there. But not everybody has been able to do the work and the processing of grief. And so if we just bypass that, if we just say, oh, 2020 is over and so we can move on, then we're kind of lying to ourselves, and we're not honoring all the feelings that have yet to be processed, so that we can actually feel into joy in a bigger way, and we can, you know, it's like this idea of, and a lot of my clients too that I come across, right? Like, there's this burying of feelings over and over and over, and for years and for years. And I think grief is probably the most detrimental feeling to bury. So yeah, so what do we do? We say, look, we want 2021 to really be a beginning, to your point, right? Like, endings are beginnings. So what are thoughts you have on what we can do to process all of this grief?
I have many thoughts.
Of course you do. Yeah.
I think there's definitely an energy around the beginning of this year, which is, oh God, it's not over. like we are, like, we didn't get the newness, you know. I mean, the good news is that it's come. It is on its way. Like, whether you're wanting to political landscape, or whether you're wanting to look at what astrologers and energy workers are saying about what's happening with the planets, or whether you want to just think about what's happening with, you know, the community consciousness. Like, there's many different frames and lenses that you can look through that lead okay, well, we're not there yet, but it's coming. But if we are to wish the best for ourselves in this moment, then what would be best is to take the time and the moment to be with whatever is present with you. If it's grief, to be present to it, and to give it some love and attention, so that it can bring out the the transformation that it provides for you. And one way that I help people understand how you can begin to, there's a little framework I use, which is the myth of medicine. So I think that there's 3 key myths about grief, which are our points, which are what we're collectively in a conversation about around grief. That is not actually the best for us, not actually the medicine that's going to help us to move forward. So I thought, Tosca, we could share those 3 myths and the medicine, just because I like to give people something to actually do.
No, I love that.
All the like, what do?
100%. This is about the tools. This is about the real talk on what the real deal of what we're talking about, and how do we, like, move forward and use tools to help us do that. Yeah. So please, I've been writing, by the way. I'm like taking golden nuggets. So Yeah, the myths. Like, what are the myths?
Okay, so the first myth is
I lost you for a second there.
just going to pause for a second because I can see rolling around. Oh, you're back. I think a bit of a.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Okay, I think we're back.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Internet gods, for doing your dance together. So the first myth is don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. No one wants to talk about the grief. It's uncomfortable. Don't bring or something has happened. It's just like don't remind them. Don't bring it up. That's painful. It's not about it. That is a myth. When we are in the experience of grief, yes, we're uncomfortable. Yes, it's painful, but we are in it. It would be great if we could be recognized for the fact that we're in it. You know, just recognizing that it's happening for someone or for our community or for our business or for our family. Just taking the moment to recognize that it's real and it is happening. Here's the catch. People don't know how to do that because then they're like, oh, but you know, what if I say the wrong thing, or what if I hurt them more, or whatever the case may be. Absolutely, it is very possible that you could actually say something that makes somebody cry or makes somebody feel uncomfortable. You often cry with grief and it's often uncomfortable, right? So just also, I think just being okay with that.
Yeah.
For me, in terms of like acknowledging that it's happened, is acknowledging that grief is a process of many. Number one is ask the people in your life, the people in your workplace, how is someone in a grief process, how are you? Like that's almost the worst question because you're not feeling good. You're not, you know, and then people want to bypass it by saying, I'm fine, it's all good.
Right.
The medicine for myth number one is acknowledging that it's happening and asking, how is your heart? And then just wait for the answer. Just wait for the answer. And it's a little bit risky to ask the question, I know, because we're not used to it. We're used to just asking the generic, how are you? Trust me, someone in grief does not want to answer the question, how are you? And it may be new for them to answer the question, how is your heart? But it is actually the medicine. It is actually the medicine, because that's the strong thing for someone in a grief process. It's all about what's happening in them. You want to be at service to them, ask them how their heart is. That's the medicine.
And then what, like, when they answer that, then just go from there. Just holding the space.
Just go from and just you just listen and you hold space. So this goes on to myth number two, Tosca. Myth number two is that grief needs to be fixed. You need to deal with it, finish it, be done with it. Let's fix it. So we'll want to go into the fixing mode. We do it out of a space of like, we want the pain for the person to go away. We do. We want our own pain to go away. So we think, right, how can I fix it? No? There's no fixing. Grief does not ask to be fixed. Grief asks for your attention. and space and time so that you can be with feelings that are emerging and with the processing of the loss or the break or the separation, whatever is happening that caused the grief experience, to be with it. Don't try to fix it. The thing that you can do when you're being with it is thinking, what has this gifted me? What do I now know or now feel because of the love because of the connection that I had? To bring those lessons and use those lessons, stitch your heart back together. Because you don't get the place, the person, the idea, the job, you don't get them back, but you get to keep the lessons and you get to take them forward.
You know what I think of when you talk about this particular myth is, this idea of so many people having to go back home, so many young people having to go back home, or even like teenagers who aren't able to like individuate and like, go do their own thing. They're still stuck with their parents, and that's something that it's like, there's a loss there. There's a loss of independence, loss of,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know why it makes me think of that, but um, I love this idea of what has a gift at me. What opportunity is there now that I'm in this situation?
Yeah. Because that's what you get to keep, right? You get to keep what you've learned and your experience, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Grief will never be fixed. It doesn't, and it transforms and evolves to the point where we don't recognize as a grief anymore, because it's actually a revolution of our heart, right, and creating a new heart vibration for us, and therefore we've transmuted, transformed, shifted, not begin, end. It's like a constant process. Energy is always moving, energy is always changing. There's not a point where it stops. The point where it stops is the end, the death. Everything else leading up to that is the evolution. So rather than try to fix it, you could just try to be with it.
I'm curious, for
Will
those
transform.
who may feel like, oh, sorry, I think there was a little technology delay. For those who feel like the grief is like endless and endless, and they've sat with it, and it's been in, it's, and then and I can just imagine there are people out there that's like, no, something is broken, like this has to be fixed. They're unable to move on, or at least this is the language, that's out there, right? Like, you got to move on from this, or, whatever they might be hearing that is part of these myths. But I would imagine that there are a lot of people who feel that grief for a long, long, long time, and it doesn't seem to get better, and probably do have a desire for fixing. And I don't know if that's because, yeah, I mean, what would you say in those situations, or with people that have just been feeling those really heavy feelings, and haven't been able to get to the full processing of that, I guess, so that they can move on. Not move on, that's a bad phraseology. Uh, to move forward with the grief in a way that they can still feel good, you know?
Yeah. I think we're still freezing in and out.
I know, I don't know why that's happening.
I don't know what's happening. So what I would say is seek inside yourself. So whether it's like a trusted friend or mentor that holds space for you, or whether it's learning a new spiritual practice or tool, engaging in a creative process, finding a therapist or a healing modality that works for you. Like in my process, there was like so many different reaching outside of, like I went, and I sat with Buddhist monks and learned meditation. I went to hypnotherapy to transform and work through some of the memories that I was having that were disturbing me. I, spent time with, a really good friend of mine who's a Reiki master, talking about the spiritual aspects. I spent time writing, because for me, writing is a healing process. And so there's many, many different times when I reached outside myself, and there were particular times when I was really aware that where I was at in my process was the point where, oh, you could easily drown here. Like the waves are getting really high up on the nose. Like, you're losing some space here. And that's when I would tune in and say, what do I need? If I am committing to the wish to do and be the best for myself, what do I need now? And sometimes it absolutely, if need be, reach outside yourself and find what you need.
Yeah, that makes so much sense because I think that we have this destructive mentality that we have to figure everything out on our own and we have to heal on our own and this just and we just have a really hard time, I think, collectively in this culture, I think in a lot of cultures to reach out. And it's
And
just,
particularly around, shouldn't I be over it by now? Shouldn't I be past this? Shouldn't I be feeling better by? Shoulda, woulda, nah. Stop it. It's like if you think, be with that feeling, find what you need next. Like in the grief guidance work that I do, a lot of it and present to their own grief experience, and then following of resources and tools. Says what's going on for them. And are completely depending on who they are, what they've lost, how far they are into the process, what they need in this heart, and it's in your heart, not anybody else's.
Yeah.
So you want to know myth number 3?
Yes.
Myth number 3 is I can't allow the grief, because if I allow the grief, it's going to swallow me up and I'll drown. It's too big. I can't let it in.
Yes.
Right? So a lot of people do that with just like, that just feels too much. Nope. Or I'm just going to ignore that, or push it away, or drink it away, or, get obsessive about my exercise or eat a lot of donuts. Anything other than surrender to the grief. Myth. You will not be swallowed by grief. It will hurt. It will be painful. There will be moments when you think like, oh my God, am I actually ever going to land at the bottom of this hole? Because I feel like I'm falling, right? Absolutely that happens. But the medicine is to know that our body, our hearts, our mind, our spirits automatically and naturally seek balance. For an example, like when we move into like really going into the ugly tears, which I can do very well, when it's, the face is contorting and the body is shifting and like it's really racking through you and you're thinking, whoa, like, am I going to stay here? This is like intense. There's a whole heap of chemical processes in the body that literally go into action to move you back towards a balance point. You will naturally move towards the moment where you take the bigger, deeper breath and then you calm down. Right? It's the same with our spiritual energy. Our spiritual energy will allow us to go to an extreme, but the pendulum will swing back. So it's also just to trust yourself that if I surrender and allow this, I am safe within it. So working with people, as I say, you don't just go and jump into the deep end straight away. Let's just put a little toe in, and then we'll go in and have a little bit of a paddle around, and then we might try and go into the waist, and then we'll just expand your capacity to be with it. Because you won't down. But if you don't surrender to it, what will happen is it will bury you. It will bury you and it will diminish your ability to process all emotions. Because we don't get to choose. We don't get to choose, okay, I'm going to process my anger and I'll also take a bit of the happiness and I'll also process my frustration. But I don't want to process the grief or the sadness or my lack of patience. I don't want that. You don't get to do that, right? It's how you work your heart, is how you work your heart in all areas of your life. So if you want a big, beautiful life, be big and courageous in all of the experiences that come your way. Just little by little. Little by little.
Yeah.
You don't have to dive straight in and go into the intensity of it. But you can tell yourself that you actually can hold yourself in this. And also your body, your mind, and your spirit will naturally seek the balance. There will be the moment you take the breath.
Yeah, it's like it wasn't that. I mean, it was the other week I was trying to process something and I was not wanting to feel it, and I had a friend, slash fellow coach who was like, how about we just set the timer for 2 minutes and you just allow that. And, I think that's what you're, about the just dip your toe in or just like, and then you can see that, for me, and that, it was like, oh, okay, like I won't get swallowed up in this moment of allowing myself to feel these uncomfortable feelings, Yeah, it's such a powerful idea of like, it's not all or nothing. It's like let it all in or don't let it in at all. It can be somewhere in that continuum based on where you are.
Yeah, I use the metaphor a lot about, like a lot of people use the metaphor of grief comes in waves. And as an Australian growing up here, the Australian surf, rough, like, great for surfers, but not learn how to work with the waves, right? And so then if you're towards you, if you look at it, then the wave wave is going to come and crash on you, right? If you like stay frozen with it, the wave is going to crash and you're going to go tumbling around in the ocean. And you're going to get water up your nose and it's going to be ugly. If you're standing there and the big wave is coming towards you, you freak out, you turn and you go running back to the shore, you might make it. Or the wave is going to come hit you on the back of the head, pull you around, water up your nose. It's not pleasant. Right? So being frozen or running, not the best moves when the big wave is coming. When the big wave is coming, what you do is you stay present to watching it come. And when it's close, when you can feel I have surrendered to the fact that this is present and this is coming towards me, you take a really big, deep breath and then you dive underneath the wave and you come out the other side. That's how you learn to in the Australian Ocean. As a little kid, you're swimming. Everyone tells you dive under that wave. When it's coming, take a big breath and dive under that wave. It's the same with grief. When the big wave of the emotion, or if like it's just like, I know I'm feeling lots of things right now, I'm just going to give myself 5-10 minutes this morning to sit and feel. Let the waves come. When they come and you can feel them rising in you, stay with the breath and just dive under and with those emotions that are rising, because you will come out the other side. In the process of, you might have a rush of emotions and like intense hurt in the heart area of everything that you're feeling, but you will come out the other side of the wave, because we're not freezing and we're not running. We're just being present to it and using our breath as our anchor. So the breath is the thing that's going to anchor you to staying present with what's emerging. Yeah, little by little, wave by big breath, dive under.
I love that. What a beautiful analogy, And there's something that, I mean, we kind of touched on it at one point in a previous conversation, but it's coming up for me now again too, which is one of the things that we haven't talked about in terms of grieving also is our own health, our own, like, what we've lost in our health, perhaps, whether there's a chronic illness or whether, it's something short term, but it just feels so, you feel so much loss because you can't access it in that moment. And I imagine too that people that have, like, for example, maybe gotten COVID and they've gotten to the other side of it may also be experiencing forms of grief. I mean, I just think of this wave example, right? It's like they got probably pummeled by a wave and didn't even know what this emotion, what emotions came up as a result of that. And yeah, I'm just curious your thoughts about this idea of, like, in the arena of health and losing, feeling like either we actually lost, or we have lost, or that the feeling of not getting something back.
Yeah, and I think it's the thing, it's like, well, you can't fix it, you can't go back. And so you stay with and honor the fact that it has been lost. Because the thing with grief is it goes back to that, let's fix it, right? So everyone's like, okay, so what can I do? It's like, well, you can sit with it. Okay, and then what do I do? I'll just sit a little bit longer. Sit, feel, write, meditate, cry, like, do whatever is going to help you there to process and be with it. But the process of grief is to be with it. Because if we don't, what happens is grief is or denied, and it becomes unprocessed. And unprocessed grief then comes out in anxiety, depression, addiction, denial, apathy. Like, I'm sure that there's so many people who are medicated right now for either depression or anxiety They don't need that medication. I mean, they need that medication now to manage day by day. But I think what they actually need is somebody to be able to say, I will sit with you and let's talk about what you have lost. Let's
Yeah. Mm. We we can't. I can't hear right now, and I'm hearing that. I don't know if something happened on. I thought it was just me, but then one of the audience members said they couldn't hear anything. But you can hear me? Oh, you can't hear me either. So strange. I can't hear you. And I don't think the audience can hear in this moment because we have a comment here. They say they can't hear anything. Hmm. Hmm. I don't know. We could, yeah, somebody else is saying it cut out. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. So they can hear me, but they can't hear you. You can hit mute by accident, did you? Hmm. So strange. Um, we could always hop out and hop back in, but I don't want to lose this video, so I want to save it and then do you want to try that? I guess you can't hear me. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, let's try that. Okay, we'll try this. Well, hopefully. Can you guys hear me? Those of you who are still on? Let me know. Let me know if you can hear me, because otherwise I might have to restart. Let's see. Okay, you can hear me. Thanks. Let's hopefully she's jumping in right now. Okay, I think I can hear. Ah, there you are. There you are.
me.
We can hear you.
Crazy energy, right?
That was so, yeah, so strange. I never have, well, I should, like, yeah, the tech issues today is new. Um, so yeah, so maybe going back to, I just don't want to lose what you said around our last topic of, I'm trying to think of where we were. We were talking about allowing the grief.
Mm-hmm. And I was talking, I don't know if this was called because I'm not quite sure where I got cut out, but I was talking about the danger in not being with our grief. The
Oh,
fact that
yes.
the energy doesn't go away. It's not like if you ignore it, it's just going to disappear. It just transforms into something else. So depression, anxiety, addiction,
Right.
something else that's not the best for you is what's going to transform. But the
Mm,
seed of it, people are anxious about what they're
right.
in the fact that it will transform. Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's just such this I think the big takeaways that I'm hearing from you, right, are in allowing the feelings to come, allowing yourself to feel them, and acknowledging what you need in those moments, and asking for support if that's what's being called, or um, what have you.
Yeah. Yeah. Just be with, surrender to, don't push it away, breathe through, and understand it's a process and it's going to take some time,
Hmm.
but it does transform.
Mm.
It does absolutely transform. And then on the other side of the transformation, on the other side of that big wave, you do get expanded capacity
Mm.
for joy or for what you want next. And you get like a trust in yourself also.
Mm.
Like now that I have been with the broken pieces of my heart, really, really deep with, I completely trust my heart now.
Mm.
I have a really strong relationship to my heart vibration because I stayed with it. Not just in the good times, but in the bad times too.
Mm. You're such a testament to, and I feel like a beacon of, you serve as a beacon of hope of getting to the other side. And now actually, the fact that you have this big life magic business, right? And it's helping people to find magic in their lives. I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit about that. I know you have something going on tonight you'd like to invite people to.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that really assisted me in my grief process was spiritual practice
Mm.
in various different ways. And one of the things that I really brought into my process of grief was following the phases of the moon.
Mm.
And so one of the things that I offer with Big Life Magic is moon transformation programs. So working with a group of people going from new moon to waxing moon, full moon and waning moon, because each phase of the moon has its own particular magic. And there's different tools and rituals and exercises you can do with each phase of the moon to actually be with, to be present to breathe through, and then to process whatever it is that you're feeling or whatever your reality is,
Mm.
and be in the process of transforming it to what you want it to be. And so I just finished a moon magic transformation that you were a part of, Tosca, which
Yes.
took all of the magic makers through 2020 into 2021. And it was absolutely magical. And then once that finished, I just had this feeling of there has to be more.
Mm.
Like tonight is the first new moon of 2021. And there's some big astrological and energetic patterns happening. And I think it's a great chance to stop, check in, tune in, and say, well, how am I feeling? What am I present to? And what are my wishes and intentions for 2021? Because the calendar tells us the new year begins on January 1st.
Mm.
Whereas energetically, if you look to the moon, look to the skies, look to the universal energy, it's going to say new moon is new year.
Mm.
So tonight is everybody's chance to revisit and reset your 2021.
Mm.
So that was just too delightful as an idea. I was like, okay, a community of magic makers all working together to reset their 2021. Yeah, I can't bypass that.
Yeah,
Let's go
like sign
ahead.
me up, sign me up.
Yeah,
How can people, and the fact that you're doing this, free for people is just amazing, because you offer so much value in this. I've experienced it myself. So how can people um, sign up for that for tonight at 7 o'clock?
yeah. So it's on Eventbrite. So I can put the Eventbrite link into the comments.
Okay.
But it's called New Moon Magic Ignite 2021, and it's an event hosted by Big Life Magic. You can also find the link to the event in my Instagram bio.
Great.
You'll also see the link there.
Mm.
Or if you can't find that, just reach out to me at Debra@biglifemagic.com, and I can just send anyone the link that's interested. But yeah, it is open to anyone and everyone who is wanting to come. We already have an amazing and new community of magic makers coming. I'm very excited.
Yay.
And it is my gift to the world. It's just like, if you really want a little bit of more magic in your life, turn up.
Who couldn't use a little more magic right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love this idea of resetting. And, at the end of the day, I feel like that's what we have the ability to do. We can reset ourselves every day, every moment, to find a new path forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to let people know about also is my memoir, A Series of Serenity.
Yes, please.
Which is the story of the loss of my lover, my father, and my son. But it is the story of really essentially the work and the process of working through those losses and getting to the other side of that wave. And so when I wrote the book, it was very intentional that I wanted to write it as my personal story, but at service to other people working through the heartbreak of loss, so that they could have a story to use as a catalyst to reflect on their own story. And within the story, you also literally read some of the chapters of points where I reached out and I got a particular healer, or I went to Sri Lanka and I sat with the monks, or I went into silent meditation for 10 days, or, all of the actual things that I did are in the story, which I think helps people to be able to understand that they have choices about how they want to be with and sit with it. So if people are interested in getting an excerpt of my memoir, again, they can reach out to me or message me directly, or send me a message at Debra@biglifemagic.com, because I'm happy to give a sample of the book to anyone who's just wanting to maybe explore whether working through their grief process is something that's going to serve them in 2021.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's a book that I want to dig into myself for sure. And Lauren had to pop off, but she said thank you for the important work you're doing in this world, and that it is absolutely. Yeah, and I love that. The theme, right, that you shared was that you just kept trying new things to help you get through, to help you find the next step. And that really parallels the work that I do in, career coaching too, which is like when you feel like you're in a rut and you're stuck, it's about doing things differently. It's about finding different avenues or changing the patterns, switching it up. And so it's just, it's such a universal, I think, counsel for any time you're feeling like you don't know what to do next.
Yeah. And I think also understanding that what you need next might be something completely new.
Right.
Because if you have transformed and changed and moved something within yourself, then in the next chapter, you're going to need something new. Like, stay curious, stay open, stay willing, stay allowing. And when you need it, reach out and ask for the help.
Well, I love, those are great kind of sentiments, I think, to wrap on. Is there anything else that, you want to share with this audience before we sign off?
Is there anything else? Well, just stay connected. Stay connected to Tosca, stay connected to me, stay connected to your heart. And, wish the best for yourself in 2021.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm certainly wishing the best for you, Deborah, and for our audience, present and future watchers.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for your, what's happening with you these first few months of the year. And I just wish you so much so much love and joy in your own journey. And thank you again so much for taking the time to spread your wisdom with this audience here.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. Happy to be with you for your first Talk About It Tuesday of 2021, and happy new moon to
Yes.
you and everybody.
Yes, yes. And I will see you tonight for sure.
Yeah, everybody's welcome. Join in for magic.
All right, we'll be sure to share that when we post this and get that link
Yeah,
out there.
great. Thanks,
Okay.
Tosca.
Thank
Goodbye,
you.
everybody. Big love.
Take care.
Bye.
Ciao for now.
Bye.
Bye.